everybody. This is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author. And on the podcast, I have Michael Kaufman. And very excited to talk to you, Michael. Welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be with you, Alan.
So you have a new book coming out. It's The Last Exit. I believe it's out now, is it right?
It is. Actually, it already popped into its second printing, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Well, The Last Exit is a near future mystery. It's a crossover book. So there's elements of a classic police procedural. A police detective is trying to figure out who done it and why and all that. But it's also set in the near future, set in Washington, D.C. in 2033. So there's elements of speculative fiction. Washington 2033, I mean, climate change is hitting hard. There's rampant inequality. There's a virus that is taking down a lot of folks in their 40s and 50s. It's not a dystopian novel. I've got to add that, one of these grim dystopias where, it's sort of, endless fog and neon and doom and gloom. But there are dystopian elements in this. Of course, I guess you could say the same pretty much for Washington, D.C. today, for example, or any day of the week. But there are dystopian elements, but it's not a dystopian novel per se. But it focuses around a D.C. Police detective named Jen Liu, who is trying to get to the bottom of what appears to be some illegal street versions of a longevity treatment. Now, you're coming from San Francisco. I mean, all about this, all these tech zillionaires who are popping money into trying to figure out how to live forever. And I guess if you've got billions, you've got to figure out how you're going to spend the damn thing. So anyway, go ahead 12 years, there's some sort of longevity treatment available to the super rich. There's also a modified version of this treatment that doesn't let you live forever, but allows you to live in a healthy way until you're in your 90s. And this is particularly important because, as I said, there's a virus that is striking down a lot of people in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And here's the big dystopian element. There's a new policy out called Exit. And that is if parents choose to voluntarily die at 65, exit, their kids will get this, this modified longevity drug. And it's one of those things, as a parent, as every parent knows, you'd do anything for your kids. And this would be a biggie. You're going to die so they can live. Anyway, there's an illegal version of this treatment that appears to be going around. And then it appears that people are dying from it. So my police detective, Jen Liu, is trying to figure out who is behind this, what it's all about, what's happening. And and we take it from there. She ends up having to, risk her life, her career, all of the above to get to the bottom of what's going on.
Wow, yeah, a lot of concepts there. I really love I was reading the blurb of your book. Like you mash a lot of different genres, which I think is really cool. How is that something because you were just interested in different things? You just want to pick one and you just started mashing? Or?
Yeah, I can't. It was not for Machiavellian reasons. It is cool actually to get reviewed now on mainly mystery and thriller. Book sites but science fiction in there too, and some non-genre fiction. I read one reason is I read all over the place. I read a lot of crime and thrillers. I do read some science fiction. I read just straight ahead novels, classics. But also it's my own work over the years, aside from writing, has been as an advisor and an activist working on issues around engaging men to promote women's rights. I've worked over the years extensively around the world in the UN system with different governments, NGOs. And so I wanted to bring some of the issues that I'm interested in onto the pages. Now, this is not a nonfiction book. It's, this isn't homework to read this book. It's fun. But I wanted to engage readers conceptually, as well as, getting people to turn the page. And so it just seemed that this sort of cross-genre approach would allow me to both have a lot of fun, first of all, entertain people, but also to explore some real issues that face us as well, not just as readers, but as citizens and human beings.
Yeah, you mentioned that you have the climate change and inequality. That's all stuff that's been going on for years. But you also threw in the virus in there. Was that before you started writing this before all this pandemic
Yes,
stuff?
it's funny. I was talking to someone who just to a reader who didn't know, and there's no reason why they would know the laborious process to go from writing a book to luckily I had an agent already, but then going through the working on a book with your agent and others, and then they pitch the book, they sell it, then you go through a whole year with your publisher. So yeah, this was written back in started it in, I think, around 2018, 2019, wrote the bulk of it. And they were saying, but listen, it's got this virus. And in fact, it's funny, Alan, on the second page of the book, there is a scene. My detective is wearing an N95 mask, not because there's this virus. That's not really that big a deal in this part of the book, but there's a big forest fire that is in the Great Shenandoah Blaze that is sending smoke into DC. And this person I was talking to said, yeah, well, you were taking that from the big fires in California last year. I said, no, this was way before that. And then she said, well, what about the virus? And well, actually, she puts on this mask. And in the original that I wrote, I just wrote she put on her N95. When I was editing it, I realized, who the hell is going to know what an N95 is? Like, no one's going to know that, this obscure reference. So I changed the sentence to make it clear this was a mask she was putting on. Of course, by the time the book comes out, who doesn't know what an N95 is? Yeah, there's several things like that. As I said, climate change is hitting hard. There's this virus. Part of the backstory is a movement not unlike Black Lives Matter. It's focused it's set in DC. It's focused around police brutality. One big difference is the movement includes some rogue police officers who decide to screw the thin blue line. I'm going to work in solidarity with my community and others. And so there's a big overhaul in the mid 20s in DC policing. Again, it's kind of interesting, but and a lot of stuff on income inequality. But the thing is, Alan, you don't have to be you don't have to have a PhD in political science. I mean, I actually do. But anyway, you don't need a PhD in political science to make those connections. I mean, you and I are living at a time of momentous challenges. I mean, huge, huge challenges. And I think, I love reading everything. I love reading stories that are just totally escapist and, all that. But in the end, I don't want to write a book that pretends I'm living in some, I don't know, dream world, or a book set today that could as easily have been written, in the 1960s or 70s. I mean, we're confronted with some existential challenges to us as humans. So I wanted to, as I say, the book doesn't get into lectures. It's not a diatribe, but these issues are part of the texture of the world that Jen Liu lives in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, like how the fine balance of your interest and your experience in these issues, but then writing it as fiction and entertainment. Was that something that was a challenge, or?
Basically, no, and I'll tell you why. Because I also write nonfiction.
Oh, okay.
My last book that came out 2 years ago now was called "The Time Has Come: Why Men Must Join the Gender Equality Revolution." So, and I talk and stuff on these other issues. So I didn't feel I didn't need a soapbox. I had that. I give a lot of talks for a living, so I didn't need a soapbox. I wanted it just to be part of the background, just like it's part of your and my, our background, whatever it might be. I didn't want to have to explain things. So it's just there. I also, one of the reasons that, and I love writing this, and this is the first of a series of mysteries with this character. writing it as a mystery is that mysteries, and any good mystery does this to you. They force a certain discipline on the writer. My other fiction, my other two books of fiction haven't been mysteries, and I realize in retrospect that when you just write a non-genre novel, you've got so much latitude. You can take it in different directions. You can talk about the weather for 3 pages if it's poetic. You do whatever you want. I mean, obviously, you could screw yourself trying to do that, but you've got a lot of latitude. Mysteries are really plot driven. They've got to be tight. They've got to make sense. They've got to hang together. You can't have think pages that people are going to skip over just to get get to the plot or get to the dialogue. Now, I say it's plot driven. I also think they need to be strongly character driven. There are some mystery series that I read and I enjoy, but the character doesn't change from book to book. You could read book 10 in a series and the character, male or female, is indistinguishable from 10, 15 years before. And again, I wanted to create a character that was going to be interesting, that was going to have challenges like any character, but was also going to evolve and change in the course of this series. And well, we'll see. I'll let others judge that one. So far, nice feedback on that. Yeah, partly I wanted the discipline of that writing that tight story that just didn't give me space to just to be dropping my opinions and editorializing too much.
Is this your first mystery that you've written, that you've published? Or?
It is that I published. Yeah, there's one sitting on my computer somewhere.
Oh yeah, we all have those.
yeah, we all do. Yeah, my first novel was a straight ahead novel that Penguin did a number of years ago. My second, which I actually co-wrote, is an anti-war fable. And yeah, that's my first novel. So yeah, it was fun to write. I've already finished the sequel. That's the routine. By the time in a series, by the time one comes out, you've done the draft of the next one. So the next one, I guess, will be out a year from now.
Yeah, exciting. So how about so your character, Jenny Lou, is there challenges as being a male writer writing female characters? I always ask that for my for writers whose protagonists are female characters. Any challenges on that? Any concerns?
There certainly are concerns. I didn't make that decision lightly. But one of the nicest things that I've heard from both seen in different reviews and I've heard from different people is from women reviewers and readers, they just said they felt good about what I did. They felt I nailed it, that she rang true. I think part of that comes from two decisions, one thing in my life and one decision as a writer. In my life, as I said a minute ago, a lot of my work has been engaging men to support women's rights. And where that work starts with is listening to women, listening to the voices of women, the concerns of women, not trying to, take over and say that we as men have got all the answers, or even perhaps half the answers at best. And so what that allowed me to do is to approach the task of having a central woman character with a lot of with a lot of care and caution and checking on things, just checking on details and with women writers and being willing to back up. And if I wrote something and my wife would read it and would say nope, no woman would do that, and good, this is what we need. Here's the decision I made as a writer. There's actually two narrative voices in the book. And this is a big element of the book and the story, which I haven't mentioned yet. And that is Jen Lou is part of an experimental program in DC in 2033. She has a synthetic, sort of a biocomputer implant in her brain. I guess that's the other big dystopian element in the book. And it will be an issue I get to explore, the whole role of AI in our lives. Anyway, she's got this synthetic implant. This implant is named Chandler. familiar name to mystery readers, of course. And Chandler is he's a wannabe tough guy, but he's only, 2.5 years old, or less than 2.5 years old. So he has a hard time pulling it off, the tough guy routine. But Chandler narrates about half of the book. So I go between chapters which are literally inside Jen's head, narrated by this synthetic implant, telling her story, between that and a third person narrative. So I don't attempt to narrate in her voice, although of course her voice is there as dialogue and conversation. But I stay out of, well, Chandler's in her head, but I stay out of her head in that sense. I don't, there are all the concerns and debates about appropriation of voice. And, it's a really interesting and complex discussion around that. So I'm not taking a position on that, but I'm not pretending to narrate in her voice or from her experience. So I do play with that. I guess I take it on, that challenge right at the margin of what seemed smart as I set out to do that. But also, Alan, I got to tell you what happened. I knew that my character Jen Liu was going to evolve. As I was saying a minute ago, good mysteries, good books, characters change, they develop, they're confronted with the things in the story, and that affects them as a character. That's that interaction of the plot and the character. So I knew that Jen Liu was going to deal with some of her demons, both in this book and as the series goes on. I knew that. Here's what I didn't know: that my synthetic computer implant Chandler was also going to change. So this guy, I say guy in quotes, obviously he's not a guy. He's a lump of, some sort of matter. But this synthetic computer, biocomputer, actually starts changing in the course of the book. He starts doing things that certainly were not in my plot outline. And this was one of the most exciting things for me as a writer, that suddenly I had this voice, this computer that was really becoming a character. And it was the thing, when Crooked Lane, my publisher, bought it, that was the first thing they said is, "We love Chandler. We love that narrative voice." So yeah, it was both a lot of fun to write in that voice, and his voice, his quote voice, or his quote his, but also, to see how that just enriched the story in ways I didn't expect.
Yeah, that component seems really fascinating to me, since a really cool concept too. It reminds me, there's a movie. The movie isn't very good, but I like the concept of it. What was it? I think it's called Upgrade. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
No.
he has this chip put in him, and same thing, and it's this AI voice in his head that makes him do things. And so the concept was good, but the movie wasn't very good, but the concept was cool. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is like, that, but hopefully, as you're saying, it's evolving and changing. I think that's so cool.
And Alan, what I didn't want to do, I didn't, let's say I do read science fiction, but I didn't want to, turn this into, I don't know, just, movie of the week. So the bad movie with, man with computer in his brain, or woman with computer in her brain. One of the questions I will be dealing with as the series goes on is, as I said, is this, human computer interface that we're all in some way or another part of, even though it's not implanted yet. Well, it is for some people. I have a friend with Parkinson's who's got a computer in his brain now that's helping keep him mobile and alive. So it's not conscious. That's the big difference. And I actually don't think by 2033 we'll have conscious entities in our brain. But, there'll be this different forms of augmentation. That will be an issue I deal with. But yeah, it also makes the book fun, I think. One of the great things, I'm waiting for it to arrive, but I just heard clips, but the audiobook version actually has two narrators, which I love. There's one narrator for the Chandler narrated chapters, and it's a male voice actor, and then a female voice actor for the other third person narration. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Like you mentioned before, who knows what they're working on down here in Silicon Valley? I'm 40, 50 miles away from there. You always see those driving cars now. They're all driving by themselves here. They're like testing, mapping everything out. So yeah, you figure somebody's probably working on something like this, but who knows?
Oh yeah, you can bet.
Yeah, yeah. So I also wanted to ask you about you mentioned before about the pushback of like actors playing other roles and stuff. Like a white actor playing a non-white role. You mentioned that earlier, which is really interesting. I've just been wondering that myself, if that's something that you think is going to affect the writing community. Like, is that something that we're gonna get pushback on? I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's already been happening, um, and I think that as a white male writer, and I don't say that with any, I'm not saying that with a sense of inbuilt guilt. I don't think that an accident, a chance of birth, should be a source of guilt, but it has to be a source of responsibility. And that goes back to this really important notion of privilege. And I remember years ago, a woman telling me, basically, tell me what privilege is. And she said, it's ultimately all these things, Michael, that you don't have to question because you're a man. And you don't have to think about walking up to the corner to buy milk at night. You don't have to think about, she just went through this list of things that as a woman confronts her. I've had Black friends say, you don't have to think about, driving across town in your car that, you're going to get stopped and someone's going to ask you, a cop's going to ask you, whose car is this, or worse. That's privilege. And the thing about privilege, it's invisible. Now, what I say that comes with that is not, it's not that we should feel guilty, but we should feel pissed off. We should feel pissed off. I should be pissed off. I would say you should be pissed off, as someone who is white, as someone who is a man. Speaking for myself, as someone who is able-bodied, as someone who is straight, just feel pissed off that everyone doesn't have the same basic rights and privileges that I enjoy. It's as simple as that. So it's not about collective blame or collective guilt. It's about collective responsibility. It's about collective love. It's about thoughtfulness, and it's about listening. And so I think what it means for writers is that we better listen if we're in positions where we've enjoyed relative privilege. If we've had access to the airwaves because of our sex or our skin color, if we get listened to more, if we get more respect. I just read a wonderful tweet today, and sorry, I can't remember. No, I can't remember a woman, but anyway, this woman is saying she was doing some project with NASA a few 10 years ago, and she was talking about some situation, and some guy just cut her off in the middle of her explaining something, and he just said, you're wrong about this. You should read, and he mentioned an article. He said you should read whatever it is, McDonald et al., etc. So this woman said, so I pulled my hair back away from my name tag, pointed to my name tag, and she said, I am McDonald et al. Anyway, it was just this great example of privilege at work. He just felt that he could, he was the one that should, be in charge, be listened to. So I think as writers, it just means to approach, when we write about a group that has had, who has faced brutality or discrimination or racism or homophobia or sexism, approach it with a spirit of humility, of listening, but also know that there are limits on the experience that I have. There's just my life. Yes, as a writer, we try to imagine as much as possible. Thank goodness. Otherwise, all of our books would be about someone sitting in front of a computer. It'd be incredibly dull. So it's true, virtually all writing is an act of imagination. We graft on bits in our own experience and history, but ultimately it's filtered through our own experiences and the world we've lived in. So we've got to, as soon as we step out of that, we better be damn careful. We better ask questions, we better get feedback, and we should also respect when that there may be limits, and not to place those in advance, but there may be limits or moments. Perhaps I don't think it's a permanent thing, but moments where some of us just say, okay, I'm stepping back. This is not my day or my issue or I'm going to let other people do the talking here. It's complicated.
Oh yeah. It shouldn't be complicated, but it is very complicated. That of giving of just having everybody respect and have the same rights, but
it should not be. You're right.
That's what I meant to say. It should not be, but
yeah, no, that's what you said.
Absolutely is.
Yeah.
So did you always, before you wrote this book and published it, did you always wanted to be a fiction writer? Is that always in the back of your head, no matter what you've been doing, or has this come later in life?
No, I've been writing fiction. My first novel actually came out around 1999 or 2000, so 20 years ago, and it was, say, a straight ahead story. I actually dredged it up recently to try to write a screenplay based on it. It's not about to come to a theater near you, but who knows? But it was really fun to work on again. So yeah, no, I've been writing fiction for a long time. Probably some more sitting on my computer, going way back. I love most of what I read is fiction. I just love that is what I read these days. So yeah, it's always been a dream for me to be able to focus more on that. And I just decided, okay, just do it. And so I've been switching gears, still continuing my work and my speaking, particularly on gender equality issues, but transitioning more and more to writing, just focusing on my fiction writing, and right now, particularly mysteries.
And what's your process like? Do you outline your books thoroughly, or can you walk us through that, your writing process?
There's that, in the mystery world, you always hear this term, Alan, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plot in advance or go by the seat of your pants? And I'm in between. I think partly depends on the type of book you're writing. Police procedurals have to be much more tightly plotted than other genres within the mystery world that have a bit more latitude. But the thing is now, you're writing on a computer. You go back and you change things. You change those details that pop up later on. So I have a general idea. I didn't actually know. I hadn't decided for certain who my culprit was. I pretty much knew, but it took a little while. It evolved. With the sequel, I had no idea until I was about halfway through, and then it became clear in my mind. So I have an outline. I have a number of my characters, but then I let the writing process do its magic, and it is magical. I mean, you get to dream out loud. I'll be out for a run, and I'll just hear my characters chattering away in my head, and I'll just or I'll be thinking about something that was about to happen, and it just starts coming to life in front of me. I remember years ago on a novel that I was working on at the time. This was many years ago. I had one of those experiences where I was actually right into a scene, and it was this couple. They were separated. He went back to her place. They went for a walk around the block. In the outline, by the time they're around this long block, they've gotten back together. Anyway, she wasn't ready, it turned out. They didn't. And it's, we describe it as writers in these sort of mystical terms. The characters have a life of their own. And, it's poetic. It's not true. I mean, of course it's not true. They're characters in our heads that we're creating. But here's what is true. I think that for most writers, we actually have a sense of our characters that is more deep than we're consciously aware. So we think we're going to do this. And by the time we hit that chapter, we're starting to shoehorn characters that are much more real by the time we get to that chapter, much more complex. And we're trying to shoehorn them into, a certain plot expectation. And what the writing process actually allows us to do, and this is part of the beauty of writing on a computer rather than, writing a manuscript by hand. Or can you imagine writing, back in Dickens' days and having, a chapter published before you even get to the next one? We get to change things. And so as the story comes alive, as characters come alive, suddenly new characters are popping up. Suddenly I'm thinking about characters differently. And it's what you can say. I mean, I've got a smile on my face just talking about it. It's what I love about writing. It's magical.
And do you usually do you set like do you usually write in the same spot, or you like to switch it around? And
I do write at the same spot in this room you're looking at here.
okay.
It's my study, my office. Occasionally I'll just pull out my laptop and go sit somewhere different. Or if I have a scene that's set in a particular place that I can be at, I'll either go there, take notes, or actually write a bit. But no, it's basically here. I don't have a regular schedule. Partly, partly it's a problem in the sense that if I start writing first thing in the morning, I have a hard time doing anything else because I just want to keep going. So, right now, I don't even, I wouldn't even want to show you the list of things I'm supposed to be doing, and, my inbox and this and that. All the boring stuff that one needs to do in life. Because the last few, I've started a new series, and I just thought I was just taking notes, and suddenly I started writing, and I just, I'm going, and late at night, I'm finally going, okay, stop writing already.
And so what's next for you and for Jenny Lou? So you said that the second one, you're working on the second book in the series?
Yeah, I finished a draft of it. My agent has it. I'm just waiting to hear back from her. I'm lucky, I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have an agent. It's actually an agent who's has a partner. And so I get incredible feedback from both of them. I'm very fortunate about that. And, but I expect, this one feels pretty far along. We'll see what they say. And so I think that they'll be, as they say in the business, taking it out. Either back to the publisher of this one, they'll take it to first, and other publishers at some point. And I assume it'll be out about a year from now. I'm also, I couldn't have told you this a week ago, but I'm starting a new mystery series, unnamed at this point, but very different in many ways, and set in the present, here in Toronto, where I live, or mainly in Toronto. Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, and as I said, I was working on a screenplay, just a lot of different projects.
Yeah. And where can the listeners find you? Do you have like a website or?
Yeah, my website is just my name.com, michaelkaufman.com. And there's the first chapter of the book. If you go there, there's a whole bunch of articles and blogs and all the usual stuff, both from my fiction work and a lot of stuff from my work in nonfiction. I tweet from Kaufman Writes, as in writing, WRITES, Kaufman Writes. Yeah, those would be places people could track me down. And I should just say, I think like most writers, I love hearing from readers. So yeah, it's fun when already folks who have read or listened to The Last Exit drop me a note or tweet about it. I love hearing from readers.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking to us about your work and The Last Exit. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Alan, it's been really good talking to you, and stay safe.
Yes, thank you. You too.